I must thank you for starting this little diversion. It has made my work so much easier.
What's that mean, you half-human freak?
The following video contains spoilers for Red Faction, a game from 2001 whose story hardly matters. Additionally, this video will contain mild spoilers for Half-Life. If you haven't played these games, go play them, and come back, and please enjoy the video.
Die, K-Pack!
Hey, so the RE4 video turned out pretty good. Just look at that view count. Guess the decision to become one of those internet smart boy essay YouTubers was a good one. Now I can finally say things like, intended play, and, ludonarrative dissonance. And people will perceive me as smarter than them, instead of thinking I'm an asshole. I should have done this years ago, man. Anyway, what's up? It's your boy Stan here, back at it again talking about a game that came out 3,000 years ago. Since my last groundbreaking video where I made the bold claim that Resident Evil 4 is in fact good, I've been scribbling down thoughts and ideas on what to cover next. Naturally, this has taken me the better part of a year. I kinda almost wanted to just jump into another RE game, because I could probably talk about the series endlessly, but then I run the risk of branding myself as some guy who only does content about Resident Evil. That's not the plan, baby, not even close. No, your boy here is a full-fledged long-man-bad YouTuber now, ready and willing to give my opinions on game design, even though nobody asked. Restricting myself to one series or even just one genre would get so boring for me so fast. Big part of why I wanted to reboot the channel like this was because I felt too restricted by the old, record funny clips and mash them together with edits format. My editing isn't nearly ADHD enough to make a 20-minute video enjoyable in that style, I think. And I'm honestly more interested these days in dissecting games and analyzing them than I am in fucking team-killing Will for 23 minutes. So yeah, here we are, a video about Red Faction. A certified hood classic, apparently. Now I know how the viewership is probably going down right now. A good 50% of you have never even heard of this game, and the other half have been playing it for 2 decades. And will probably be very mad at me by the end of this video, because I'll be upfront about this. This game? This one? I got some mean things to say about this one. Red Faction seems to be a very beloved game. Just a glance at the reviews on Steam have people raving about how it's one of the best games ever made, or how it's one of the best shooters of its era, and so on and so forth. To put it lightly, I disagree. Red Faction is by no means a horribly bad game. It's not an unplayable disaster, but I wouldn't really call it good. It has some really cool things going for it. The Geomod engine, the aesthetic of this pseudo-cyberpunk future. Hell, it even attempts to provide varied gameplay similar to what Half-Life 2 would accomplish 3 years later. And it's around here that I begin to struggle to praise this game any further. See, the issue with Red Faction, for me at least, is that it doesn't really lean into any of its mechanics or ideas hard enough to carry the game. And what is there is poorly implemented or feels unpolished. Geomod is underutilized. The gunplay fucking sucks. The story is campy and fun, but feels kinda tacked on. The set pieces often break or are poorly thought out. The vehicles are all ass. The enemy AI is sporadic and terrible to fight against. I could go on, but that's why the rest of the video exists. It's also janky and buggy as fuck, but you'll see plenty of that soon. So, assuming you haven't called me a slur in the comments and left already, welcome. Welcome to this deep-ish dive into Red Faction. My aim here isn't to slander a beloved game. Well, not strictly. No, I'm here because I've wanted to talk about this game long before this little reboot I have going on now. This game cemented itself into my head as a child. I played the absolute shit out of the multiplayer on my dinky-ass PS2 back in the day. Though it was against bots since I didn't have the internet when I was a kid. Something about this game grabbed me, and revisiting it as an adult, I don't know, my feelings are mixed. I've spent 5 fucking years thinking about this janky-ass FPS game from 2001, and by God, it's time to talk about it. So buckle up, grab an alcoholic beverage of your choice, take a baseball bat to the subscribe button's legs, and together, let's try and dissect Red Faction, from top to bottom. A game that, despite its flaws, left an impression on so many people that it got 3 sequels? 3? Wow. Well, anyway. So before we can talk about anything regarding the game's actual design, we have to get this out of the way. Red Faction is available on Steam. That's the only version of it I've played, aside from the PS2 version I had as a kid. Now, I'm going to criticize a lot of this game's technical issues, but I'll be honest, sometimes it's genuinely hard to tell what's fair to talk about, and what's just a case of this game being screwed over by time, and probably Windows 10 specifically. See, time hasn't been kind to Red Faction. I can't say with absolute certainty whether this game runs like shit on modern machines due to a lack of support, or because it was more optimized for consoles, or whatever, but man, this game's got issues. Even patched, I encounter stuttering and random freezes and frame skips, not to mention the sheer number of bugs that don't seem to go away no matter what I do. I tried to make this video before, like 4 years ago now, back when I was younger, more full of life, and a lot less funny. This was also before that initial attempt was played on a vanilla install, no modifications whatsoever. Do not play Red Faction on PC like this. It is a miserable way to experience what is, in my opinion, a game already filled with frustrating design decisions. See, in 2018-ish, I didn't know that there were community-made game clients which improve the experience of playing this game about tenfold, fixing a lot of bugs, supporting a 16:9 aspect ratio, improving the render distances, stuff like that. Definitely makes playing through the whole thing a lot more tolerable. Man, you guys have no idea how much seething there was for me back in that first playthrough. Like, I was planning on starting the video super pissed off like some fucking AVGN knockoff, just showing a bunch of shitty clips from my old-ass laptop, being all like, "What's the deal with this submarine, am I right? What were they thinking?" As much fun as it would be to play through this thing unpatched and simply marvel at how poorly things can go in a single playthrough, it's not fair to the game to be critical of it while knowingly playing it in a broken state when a much better alternative exists. Personally, I'm going with a Steam install, but using the Dash Faction launcher. This is a pretty good way to do it for my purposes, since I can swap back to the broken-ass vanilla version anytime in case I need clips. This launcher's pretty good, just universally improves the game for modern systems. Throws in some extra stuff like being able to lock the FPS from the launcher, or change animation speed and detail for distant models. Also comes packaged with a level editor. I can't even begin to understand how to use it, but I mean, maybe you'll get some use out of it. Okay, now that all that's out of the way, read any review or passing remark about Red Faction anywhere, and you'll most likely see the word Geomod thrown around. Geomod, which is short for Geometry Modification, I think, is both the name of the game engine and the defining mechanic that holds up Red Faction. See, if you ask me, which you didn't, but I'm going to tell you anyway, Red Faction is a fairly mediocre shooter, but it has one notable gimmick: freeform environmental destruction in 2001. Now, I'm going to give this game shit for a lot of things, but the Geomod engine is still, to this day, kind of insane when you consider the level of destruction it allows for. Plenty of games have environmental destruction these days, and even back then lots of games had more limited stuff like blowing holes open in walls for certain set pieces, but nothing like this really existed before Red Faction. Even today, we rarely see anything try to match what Red Faction attempted. The closest things that come to mind personally are things like Battlefield's Levolution or Deep Rock Galactic's Caves. There's a simple satisfaction in using explosives to carve out a path for yourself, blasting through rock like it was nothing. Very few games that aren't building sandboxes like Minecraft allow for this kind of level alteration. Even fewer with friggin' guns. Now, that's not to say that Red Faction got everything right. Frankly, the game barely taps into its potential. The game can often feel like a tech demo for the Geomod engine, which, I mean, come on, it is. The engine and some of the plot were quite literally ported over from the cancelled Descent 4, a game in a series so old and niche that even my hipster boomer ass doesn't know what it is. Point is, Volition, the developers of Red Faction, clearly knew they had something special when they made this Geomod thing, and a prior game cancellation wasn't going to stop them from showing it off. Neither was the tiny budget that Volition had to work with during development. So being fair to the game, and the team behind it, Red Faction is very technically impressive and incredibly ambitious. The team behind it were underdogs for sure, lacking funds and putting their time and effort into a first-person shooter in an age where the market was flooded with them. As someone who appreciates this medium as an art form, I respect Volition for getting Red Faction done, warts and all. And I'm glad people still talk about it, because it deserves recognition for quite a lot. But as a game, design-wise, Red Faction is a goddamn mess, and I'm not going to sugarcoat my criticism simply because the game has a cool engine, or because I respect the effort that went into it. The Geomod engine, as groundbreaking as it is, gets underutilized beyond about the second half of the campaign. It makes a strong impression. The first few sections of the game are nothing but caves and rock walls for you to freely blast away at. Even if you're not stopping in your tracks to dig holes, you'll notice the destruction as soon as you start firing rockets at enemies, missed shots leaving craters in the walls and floors. Unless you're like me and you're too used to aiming for the floor on purpose because you're relying on splash damage. You know, because I suck. This sort of thing definitely adds some impact to the use of explosives. The dev clean, okay. The dev team clearly intended explosive weapons to play a big role in Red Faction, seeing as they're the only way to make use of the Geomod stuff. Unfortunately, for some reason, there's only 4 explosive weapons, and only 2 of them are projectiles. And one of the 2 projectile weapons you don't get till like the last hour of the game. Look, there's 15 weapons in this game, and we will get to the absolute mess that is this game's weapon roster, but I don't understand why most of the weapons aren't explosive, honestly. Despite Geomod being this game's defining feature, and something everyone is very keen on talking about, there are an extremely limited number of ways to even engage with it. Outside of explosives, there's like this one part where you get to use this shitty drill vehicle, and after about 35 feet of digging, the drills break. I mean, that's it, I guess. Your explosive options are a rocket launcher with rockets so slow they make the TF2 rockets feel like hit scan, satchel charges, which actually are pretty fun because you can stick them to enemies and they freak out. Then you also got these really janky, really fucked up grenades that somehow are even harder to use than the Half-Life grenades. Your last explosive weapon is basically this game's BFG, the fusion rocket. The projectile it fires has such a massive blast radius you can usually damage yourself merely by being able to see it impact something. This means it's kinda useless for digging tunnels since you'll kill yourself, unless you're on another continent. Not that it really matters by the time you have this thing anyway. See, as I mentioned before, Red Faction really doesn't do a whole lot with its Geomod engine. There's definitely some really cool ideas here and there, some excellent demonstrations of what this sort of thing can add to a first-person shooter. My personal favorite example is when you enter the geothermal plant. You can bust through the floor, take this maintenance tunnel, and get the drop on some guards waiting to ambush you. Shit like this really shows off what Geomod can add to generic FPS combat, so it's a real shame that most of this game is just generic FPS combat. There's a scarce few examples of this sort of thing. You know, breaking through walls and changing the environment to give you an advantage over the enemy. You would imagine this would be a common tactic, with the game being linear as it is. It couldn't be too difficult to just put little side paths all over that you can bust into and flank enemies, or just avoid combat entirely. But usually breaking through walls is reserved for finding some items or weapons early, or fucking sequence breaking. God, I wonder what a speedrun of this game looks like. I'm not trying to be mean, but I seriously can't find a lot of examples of me using Geomod for anything other than just fucking around. Like, yeah, there's these little set pieces where you do some cute little task. Like early on, you can bust up this bridge to knock this APC into the abyss. There's also this one part with a door that won't open. Like, this only happens one goddamn time. You gotta break through the rocks around it to get through. And the game doesn't even let you figure that out on your own. They gotta have Jimi Hendrix pop up, like, you can go around it with your rockets. I don't know, I guess it really left an impression on this guy. The idiot proofing seems unnecessary given how goddamn simple this game's idea of puzzles are. Some of this shit makes RE4's puzzles, which get shit for being kinda brain dead, look like Sudoku. Okay, calling a lot of this stuff puzzles is a stretch, I know that. This game's pretty straightforward, and it's about as linear as an FPS can possibly be. Like, seriously, Half-Life is less linear. There's absolutely zero backtracking, the whole game is a march forward. So usually, revisiting areas only happens when I'm lost and have no idea what the game wants me to do, which you would imagine would be kinda hard to have happen in a linear FPS game. But here's the thing, rather than focusing heavily on its fancy new engine to create interesting gameplay, Red Faction wants very badly to be Half-Life. At least that's what the constant set pieces and weird gameplay shifts communicate to me, and probably anybody else who's played Half-Life. Unlike Half-Life, however, a lot of this shit isn't as intuitive as you might hope. Most of it just kinda plays badly, or is a janky, glitchy mess. Again, I want to emphasize that Geomod exists, but they don't use it for anything meaningful. The game has 1,500 stupid ideas on how to mix the gameplay up, and maybe 2 of them involve blowing stuff up. Oh, but don't worry, they didn't forget to include 2 stealth sections. Kill me. Yeah, fuck you. No, it's not. Beyond surface-level comparisons, this game is nothing like Half-Life. It sure tries to be, and I can see why some people get Half-Life vibes from this game. The cool suit, the shady laboratory environments, varied gameplay styles including vehicles. I mean, goddamn, Half-Life didn't even have vehicles until Half-Life 2, and they sucked there about as badly as the vehicles in this game suck. When I talk about a game, I like to get a general idea on what other people think about it. And a common remark you'll see in reviews of this game is the "it's like Half-Life on Mars" one. Again, I kinda see why people think that way, but Red Faction comes off to me more as someone tried to emulate what was good about Half-Life. You know, an attempt was made. Like, there's set pieces and the gameplay tries to shake things up, but usually in ways that make no goddamn sense or are just poorly designed. I mentioned the stealth sections, 2 of them, and they're awful. Half-Life didn't have stealth sections, probably because they had fucking nothing to a run-and-gun FPS game. But that didn't stop this game from trying them. The first one is contextualized by the story. You gotta go get this executive asshole who's got intel the Red Faction needs. It's very campy. You get up to this lab, and there's a Red Faction member who gives you a lab coat. You know, it's like a disguise. Works like Hitman disguises if they were about 20 times less effective. Meaning if you get within a few feet of an NPC, they immediately run for the alarm button. Unless they're a guard, then they just shoot you. Thankfully, the game doesn't have fail states for being spotted, so sometimes you can quickly undo a mistake by just capping the person who saw you. You know, as long as one of the 800 cameras didn't see you do it. You can even lift the bodies and move them. The friggin' tutorial teaches you all of this. This might sound like it's kind of fun and complex, but I assure you it's not. Dev time went into these stupid stealth mechanics instead of adding, I don't know, more uses of Geomod. The game's defining feature. As soon as you put on the lab coat, you lose every weapon other than your pistol, which you only retain 2 mags for. So fighting your way through, while possible, is exceptionally painful. Instead, you're meant to slip past all the guard patrols and avoid certain routes so you don't bump into some fucking intern who sounds the alarm. It's great. There's parts of this shit that feel like the game is playing chicken with you. Like this cubicle area on the path you have to take, where you can turn a corner and there's some blank-faced office woman just sitting there. All these goddamn things to consider, and yet the solution to this section is basically just walking a specific route and occasionally waiting for someone to move out of your way so you don't bump into them and alert security. It's very bad. It's the worst kind of stealth, the crappy stop-and-wait kind, where you basically can't take any kind of active role in it. It's very bare bones, and it makes me question why this is even in the game to begin with. Because here's a question, why the hell am I sneaking? Like, I got here carrying an explosives armory on my back, why can't I just break in? They don't really tell you why, they're just sort of like, put this suit on, you need it to reach Griffin. Griffin is the name of the executive guy. I can't come up with a logical in-world reason why we couldn't have just busted in to get this guy. For fuck's sake, when you reach him, he's even willing to come along. He doesn't put up a fight or anything. He's happy to help you. The second stealth section just kinda happens. You drop into the second lab from a vent and... What? No, I'm not gonna make an Among Us joke. And you drop in with all your weapons, but Jimi Hendrix tells you to grab a lab coat because the area is swarming with guards. But... Now, I tried to do this the way the game intended, but I got stuck. I made my way all the way to this giant open room where you're supposed to get some kind of key card from the administrator's office, but the second you try and walk in, all the guards start shooting you. There's this little area off to the side with an open everything surgery going on, and all the NPCs just kind of stare at you. Now look, I'm kind of dumb, but I'm usually pretty good with puzzles and games. I swear to God, the game never indicated I was supposed to do anything but make my way here. I bring this up because after an hour of fucking around trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, I look it up, and apparently I missed a room in the first area with the vent where I'm supposed to grab a brain in a jar, and nobody tells me this. And yeah, I know earlier I said the game shouldn't just tell me how to do the puzzles, but this isn't a puzzle. The game just didn't tell me shit. Second time around I said fuck it, avoid the lab coat completely and just shoot everyone I see. Surprisingly, this works. The devs built 3 entire maps around a stealth sequence and then allowed me to just say, nah, I'm good, and fight my way through. While I'm glad this was an option, it again begs the question as to why the fuck this is in the game. Oh well, at least I got to commit some war crimes along the way.
Don't shoot me. My medkit's empty, sorry.
Remind me again, how is this game like Half-Life? Oh, I know, here's a perfect Half-Life comparison. It happens right after the first stealth section, and right before the second stealth section. Yes, they put both stealth sections right next to one another, broken up by maybe 30 minutes of normal gameplay. And if I have to say stealth section one more time, I'm gonna blow my brains out. You know that part in Half-Life where you gotta power up a thing to kill a giant monster? Alright, okay, yeah, there's 2 of those. Okay, never mind. Remember the first encounter with a Gargantua? You power up some machinery and then you lead it over to said machinery to kill it, right? Simple? Well, Red Faction tries that, except, you know, it sucks. You come out of this escort segment, because of course, and you immediately run into this godforsaken thing. The Ultor Personnel Suppression Combot. God, I hate this thing. You're supposed to lead it into a nearby room and turn on a furnace, dropping it in to kill it. But holy shit, this is just so much jankier and less straightforward than the Gargantua. Where do I even start with this? First of all, the fucking thing isn't exactly in your direct path. Unlike Gargantua, there's not an immediately obvious reason to actually attempt to deal with this thing. On my first playthrough, I ran into it, it shot me to near death in a second, and showed no obvious reaction to shots from my rocket launcher, which naturally led me to believe I'm supposed to avoid it. But no, as I said, this thing's the Gargantua equivalent. Except it doesn't want to fucking move. As I said, you're meant to lure it into this fire pit here, but the goddamn thing hardly attempts to pursue you. It's got 2 ranged options, a machine gun and rockets, so it pretty much does nothing but spam those at you, which naturally encourages you to take cover, and not, you know, stand in the open to lure it anywhere. The Gargantua is easy to figure out because as soon as you run a set distance away from it, the damn thing chases you down, because it has a close-range weapon. This goddamn robot not only sits back and comfortably shoots at you, but even when you actually figure out what you're meant to do, it's janky as hell. How janky, you ask? Well, on one attempt it got stuck on a door, an automatic door, that should have just fucking opened for it. So I go and open the door for it, you know, to help him out. He's in the hallway leading into the furnace now. I'm just trying to get him to follow me, but he will not fucking move. I ran in circles for a while trying to figure out if there's some kind of specific path he needs to take. But no, apparently what you're supposed to do is waste bullets shooting it to no effect for like 7 seconds straight, before Steve Urkel comes up and tells you about the furnace, which I guess triggers the robot's scripting, and now he'll follow you. Do you maybe see why I'm not exactly buying the Half-Life on Mars analogy? This is ridiculous. Oh, also, getting it into the furnace is weird. You have to open the fire pit first specifically, and then turn on a fan. If you do them in reverse order, the physics break and he doesn't move. As a bonus, regardless of success or failure, the entire time he's descending into the pit, he's able to light you up with machine gun fire, because the place where you activate the pit from is an open platform with almost no cover. So yeah, that's cool. Every goddamn set piece is a headache in one way or another. The vehicles are no exception to this. Red Faction is an overly ambitious title for 2001, I'll give it that, but Jesus Christ, with every new gameplay style they throw at me, I'm left wishing they would have just given me more ways to blow shit up and dig holes. That driller I mentioned earlier, the one you get to use for like 30 seconds, that's one of 5 vehicles featured in the campaign. All of them, every single one, is basic, janky, and generally unpleasant to operate. We've already discussed the driller, quite literally just a tech demo. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the campaign. There's the submarine, which appears twice, and as demonstrated earlier, is completely fucking broken in the vanilla game. I won't hold that against it now, obviously, the sub works. I mean, like, it's fine. It's got homing missiles and it controls decently, but shares the same issue with practically every other vehicle in the game where it feels like there's very limited ways to avoid damage. Enemy submarines function the same as yours. They even have homing missiles, so like, you can't dodge them. They circumvent this issue by just giving the vehicles a ridiculous amount of health. It feels very sloppy. There's also a couple sections where you get to fly a fighter space plane, I guess. It controls pretty much the same as the sub, just in the air. It's fine. The decision to include a limited ammo supply for the vehicles is kind of questionable, especially since I don't think I ever came close to running out of ammo, save for this one gauntlet near the end of the game, which was also the only time I died in a vehicle. There's a tank you drive for a single part of the game, it's stiff as a board and you can't aim at anything without rotating the entire tank. Honestly, this is probably the worst vehicle. The last one is a Jeep that served as nothing but a means of including a turret section in the campaign. I think I missed the part where you're able to actually drive one of these things, but considering it's just a generic Jeep and turret combo, I can't imagine I'm missing out on much. Alright, I'm going on and on, talking shit about this game because it's not Half-Life. That's what it sounds like, right? Well, the thing is, the reason Half-Life and linear FPS like Half-Life work is because while there's a focus on memorable set pieces and high moments, there's still an underlying focus on what generally works as a gameplay loop. In Half-Life, you take in the environment, explore, look for resources or hidden pathways, fight enemies, and then at critical points, you're presented with a puzzle or difficult battle to overcome. None of these things are revolutionary, and they're not even why Half-Life was considered groundbreaking in 1998, but the gameplay flows well and the puzzles are actually pretty decent. Things in Half-Life work because they're usually pretty well thought out, and a player can figure out what they're meant to do usually just by having eyes and a brain. Red Faction, while it can at times give Half-Life vibes, hell even I see it here and there, just doesn't quite nail the same feeling. You're not really taking in the environment and figuring out how to proceed. You're always directed on what to do and how to do it by the other characters. And when you aren't, it's because the scripting broke, or because the puzzle presented is just the devs showing off that they could make something move and react to a button. Though I will admit I do wish Hendrix would pop up for this bucket puzzle and be like, Parker, you gotta ride the bucket, there should be a button nearby. Honestly, I probably needed the hand-holding, because my dumbass bounced off the side of it and I had to sit here and wait for the bucket to go all the way up, and then come all the way back down before I could try this again. It's like they had a surface-level grasp on what people praised Half-Life for, but they didn't really have the ability or time to consider why some things work and others don't. So every idea they had, even the ones that clashed pretty severely with the core gameplay, were just put in. Now obviously there's a lot more to a shooter than just these stupid set pieces and funny engine mechanics, but before we delve into the combat, I do want to talk about the rest of the things in this game I actually do like. Take a positivity break before I get a little loud with my hot take. This is also your last hint that I think the combat is absolute trash. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that a good chunk of the music in this game has been stuck on my head since I was a child, and apparently I'm not alone in that regard. Red Faction's OST has just the right tone for what the game is trying to convey through its environments and story. It absolutely lifts the game up and bridges the gaps left by the subpar gameplay. The ambient tracks feel appropriate for trekking through vast stretches of lifeless caves, while the more energetic music hypes you up for big battles and gives off an action hero vibe as you take on dozens of guards by yourself. It honestly baffles me that this game's music is so good, because the sound design in places is kinda bad. The game regularly features stock sound effects, and I know, a lot of games use stock sounds, right? Well, here, it's It's a little more obvious, to put it one way. I also don't know why the fuck the game still skips like that, it just does that sometimes. Weapon sound effects are fine, some even sound really good like the precision rifle, but standard sound effects just feel a little lacking across the board. Again, budget title, I know. I'm not really that upset anyway because the music slaps.
Unauthorized missile launch sequence in progress. Abort immediately. 30 seconds until missile launch.
Honestly, there's pretty much only one complaint I can make in regards to the music here. Oftentimes, tracks are set to play right before a loading screen, which immediately cuts the track. There's a part where you get into one of those fighter plane things, where you only get to hear the very beginning of the track, because mere seconds after entering it, you load the next section. It sucks because pretty much every track in this game is really good, and lasts a minute or more. I guess they couldn't loop the tracks though, because sometimes if you're in an area where music plays for too long, the music just kinda stops. It's a bit lame, but what are you gonna do? Half-Life did the same shit. I've been using the game's OST as background music throughout the video so far, but I don't think I'm really doing it justice by not blasting your ears out with it. The combat in this game, as I will discuss, is mediocre at best, but there are these moments where the OST kicks in, and despite the clunky, awkward combat, I just get hyped. God, this one part in the minor barracks, there's so many goddamn guards, but the music starts swelling up and you hop on this grenade turret and just...
Training facility. Security response required.
Try it, miner. Give up.
Genuinely awesome. I wish the whole game was as good as this one track. What I think makes the OST so memorable for so many people is that it captures the oppressive feeling the game is going for so perfectly. The B-movie plot of a rebellion on Mars is silly, but fighting off dozens of guards while these reverberating synths blare, as I said, it just lifts the whole game up. When I think of Mars, this soundtrack is the first thing that pops into my head. Like, this isn't an OST, man, this is just what Mars sounds like. Definitely gonna hear this playing when Elon sends 3,000 people to die up there. I got a lot of gripes about this game, but the music isn't one of them. They got that part right. I don't have a good transition here, so we're gonna talk about the story next. I made it pretty clear with the RE4 video that I've got a soft spot for cheesy-ass B-movies, as well as anything that emulates the feeling of a cheesy-ass B-movie. There isn't really a set of rules or any defining traits that put something into this B-movie territory. It's more of just a feeling, you know? A lot of horror and action movies without a budget end up landing into that territory, where it feels like the whole thing was written by a shithead teenager. Red Faction without a doubt fits the bill, and at times goes beyond being cheesy to feeling like the story is just making stuff up as it goes on. So let's start at the beginning here. You play as Parker, a guy who, like me, has no idea what to do with his life and disappoints his parents. You get the full rundown in an intro cutscene. It's pretty neat. A little exposition heavy, but it gives you a glimpse of what you're in for. Parker came to Mars to work for Ultor, this giant company who runs a mining operation on the planet and practically owns the place. And would you believe it? They're evil! The miners are basically prisoners. They're treated like slaves, they work themselves to death, there's a plague going around. It's pretty much exactly like what being a coal miner in the early 1900s was like. The game starts with you getting off a shift where you witness a miner get into a fight with a guard for talking shit, and pretty immediately the rebellion starts. Like, just all at once. There's really no build-up at all. I would make another joke about Half-Life comparisons, but my hands are getting tired from hitting this horse carcass. People often compare this game's plot to Total Recall, I guess 'cause Mars. I don't know, I never made the connection. Truthfully, the plot of this game seems to be inspired by the real-life mine wars that took place in the US from 1912 to 1921. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and give you a goddamn history lesson, but the abridged version is that coal mining companies basically locked their workers into staying with them through shady practices. These included things like making the workers purchase their own equipment from the company, and paying for rent and their mandatory lodging, or, you know, just not paying them in US currency, and giving them fucking monopoly money instead. These companies would also have private security who would more or less act as the company police. Eventually, after the miners' union failed to renegotiate contracts with their various employers, miners went on strike. The companies sent armed guards to suppress the strike, and boom, lots of violence. I'm really not doing the history justice here, you should look it up yourself. It's a fascinating topic that doesn't get taught in schools. But the point is, Red Faction feels like that, but on Mars. I mean, the guards in this game are irredeemable bastards. The kind of self-indulgent bad guys where there's just no gray area. The game is practically telling you you should want to kill these guys. They taunt you in combat and seem to be thrilled that they get to play soldier during the rebellion. They're comically evil, as are the few named antagonists we meet. K-Pek and Misako. Two perfectly normal names that I have definitely encountered in real life. We'll get to them in a second here. Most of the story is delivered through radio chatter. Pretty early in the game you get Eos, the leader of the Red Faction, popping up to give context to what the fuck is happening. This isn't a terrible way to do it, honestly. I mean, it doesn't break the flow of the gameplay. You get to continue marching forward while the story beats get laid out in your ear. They probably did this due to budget constraints. You hear about stuff happening elsewhere, other members of the Red Faction rising up, but you never really see it. Pretty much any time you see any Red Faction members in-game, they're there to die a scripted death as you approach. It ends up feeling like Parker is the only one doing anything, like he's single-handedly winning this thing, which I guess might be the intention. It's very campy for sure. What's also campy is how the villains will pop up to talk shit, and I gotta say I love this stuff. If you're gonna go campy, you gotta have villains who don't know how to stop talking. K-Pek kinda comes out of nowhere in the middle of the game. He's the target of the second stealth section, actually. He's decent. I like how absurdly smug and evil he is. He apparently made the plague that's killing everyone, and of course it's nanomachines or something stupid like that. You spend a good chunk of the game chasing after him once he's introduced, and while he's no Salazar, there's moments in here that are just perfect.
No, Parker. I will not make it that easy. Keep pressing the button, Parker. Perhaps it will suddenly work. I weary of this, Parker. Perhaps you should find another way.
Misako is just some woman. No, but she actually just pops up near the end. Hendrix just kind of mentions she exists and that you should be afraid of her, and she comes onto the radio a few times to taunt you. I don't know, man, it's pretty weak. Though I guess Hendrix had a good reason to be afraid since she ends up killing him. Red Faction suffers a bit from not having a clearly defined antagonist. I mean, yeah, we got the goddamn company as an entity to fight against, but there's no central villain or anything to focus on as a primary goal. Hell, the game's plot basically just wings it the whole way through. Eos and Jimi Hendrix just kind of keep telling you what to do until eventually you're at a point where the game just ends. I mean, there's goals, yeah. You find out about K-Pek and the Plague and you pursue him, and then you go launch a satellite, and then you briefly go up into space. You sort of just move from one task to another. There's never really a sense of how close you are to the end. It can make the game feel like it's dragging on forever. Other linear FPS games usually have a point where you kind of know where you're supposed to end up, so you can gauge your progress. In Half-Life, you try to reach the Lambda Labs, so when you finally enter them near the end, it feels like you're near the end. Red Faction has no such equivalent, and it can be a bit jarring the first time through when you do hit the ending. It quite literally just happens. Speaking of jarring, this game has cutscenes sometimes. Every single one of them is bizarre and starts so abruptly they might as well be jump scares. Like, here's an example. I'm just wandering around looking for Griffin during stealth section number 1, and I open a door.
Stop! Don't shoot. I can help you.
Like there's no transitions at all, not even a fade to black or something. It just kinda cracks me up. That's not even getting into the content of these cutscenes. Man, there's something. Not only is the voice acting just perfect, the animations are just... oh man, look. Just look. The character's dialogue in these scenes is also amazing.
You're Griffin, right?
Deputy Administrator Griffin? Yes.
Why do I need your help? I'm the one with the gun.
I have vital information. You must take me to Eos.
What do you know about Eos?
Ultor knows all about her. They set this whole thing up.
Parker tries so hard to be a big tough guy, I love it. My favorite aspect of him trying to sound like a thug is that sometimes what he says conflicts directly with what's actually even happening. Like Griffith's telling him, yeah, I'll come along, I got intel, and Parker just goes, why do I need you? I got a gun. Like, what? Buddy, you were sent here to get him. You just spent 20 goddamn minutes stealthing your way up here. Are you implying you're gonna kill him? It's just great. I know I'm just kind of bullying the game for something that's most likely a budgetary constraint, but man, let me have fun. I love this crap. These fantastic character moments aside, Red Faction really doesn't have a lot else story-wise to really talk about. Like I said before, you sort of just go from place to place committing acts of corporate terrorism that will somehow vaguely help the resistance. The things you do feel so isolated, but the other characters talk as if there's so much more going on that you don't get to see. You don't even really get to see the impact of the things you are doing most of the time. The best example I can think of off the top of my head would be when you blow up the space station. At least you get to see it blow up. Even the villains sort of just do abstractly evil things that don't really get you invested. Like, sure, K-Pek made zombies and that sucks, but who were these people? He makes a remark when you first discover him, something along the lines of recognize anyone, and no, I don't. This game falls firmly into the I enjoy it because it's stupid category for me. Outside of laughing about the cutscenes and pointing out how absurd just all of this is, there isn't a whole lot of substance to the plot, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a driving force for the sake of the gameplay. This is a budget title, alright? I'm not expecting Metal Gear Solid 3 levels of storytelling. The whole reason we're here is because this is a first-person shooter, and I want to shoot things. So, how is the combat?
Stay together! Say no! Don't! Watch the flanks! Watch the flanks! Trick! Try and take me, Mike!
It's not great. It's got some problems. It kind of fucking sucks, honestly. Red Faction's gunplay is just bad. Combat just feels bad. I'm sure there's some people out there who've never played games with good combat who will tell me the combat is fine, but I don't care. See, Red Faction's combat is the kind of jank that occurs when designers don't playtest their game enough, or maybe just didn't playtest, I don't know. It's awkward in just about every way. Sure, it's serviceable, the game isn't so poorly balanced that it can't be played or completed. Hell, you might even enjoy the simplicity of it to an extent, but everything that affects this game's combat is just kind of off or unpleasant. Okay, where do I begin? How about we start off with the enemies? The enemy roster in Red Faction is made up of mostly humanoid enemies. You start off the game fighting the Ultor guards. They function similarly to the elites in Halo, being that they have several slight variations with different armor and weapon choice. Don't be too concerned about recognizing that though. Usually it doesn't matter what you're being shot at with, because you fight almost every single human enemy the same way, by hiding and taking pot shots. Yeah, Red Faction features mostly door fighting. To the younger viewers who don't know boomer-ass FPS terms, door fighting is when the game has too many fucking hit-scan enemies, so you hide around doorways and shoot whoever comes close. It's just about as shitty as it sounds. See, the guards aren't difficult enemies, they're just very annoying to fight. They run around sporadically with no real patterns or openings to speak of. One more Half-Life comparison because I'm afraid of change. In Half-Life, enemies have openings between or during their attacks, which gives players openings to counterattack, or at the very least, a moment to duck behind a wall or something. Red Faction has no such thing. Enemies strafe rapidly and randomly while they shoot at you in continuous volleys of hit-scan gunfire. This wouldn't be too bad if the human enemy hitboxes weren't skin-tight. Oftentimes it looks or feels like I should have hit someone when I just didn't. I understand that, yeah, sure, if you don't land the bullet on their body, you miss, but most fast-paced FPS games don't require pixel-perfect aim for something like a fucking shotgun. Of course, this is also due to the weapons themselves sucking massive amounts of unfiltered dick, but we'll get to that soon. We're so close to the rant. The guard's AI might genuinely be broken or something. I don't remember how this game ran on PS2, but these guys don't seem to have any kind of identifiable tactics at all. They alternate between running around like mad and sitting completely still in the open waiting to die. Though they might be attempting psychological warfare because they'll taunt you and talk shit while fighting, but then randomly just turn around and run. It's bizarre that the guards even have some kind of fear reaction considering there's no way to spare them that doesn't involve getting shot in the back as you walk away. Plus, remember, they're assholes. We've been over this. It's more just kinda annoying constantly hearing, "Try it, Miner. Mercy, please. You better run, Miner. Don't shoot, I'm unarmed." Just back to back in the span of a single 20-second gunfight. Other enemy types include mutants, which are the zombies I mentioned earlier. K-Pek made them. They're rejects who got experimented on with nanomachines but didn't turn into Senator Armstrong. They function like zombies. If you don't know what that means, I can't help you. There's also some shitty robots you find here and there. They're not too bad. Their hitboxes are a little wider, so they're pretty easy to hit even with the least accurate weapons in the game. And then, giant rats? I don't know, K-Pek talks about them as if they're his. I guess they're rats. Let's check the wiki. Okay, they're called Reapers, cool. They're not necessarily rats, but I'm calling them rats. What's important here is that their AI is even worse than the guards. There's also psychic manatees. I have nothing further to say about that. They only appear 5 times. Lastly, when Misako shows up, you get to start fighting the mercenaries. And only the mercenaries. For about the last third of the game. They're fun because they're equipped with the strongest weapons in the game, 2 of which can one-shot kill you. It's so fun. Generally in a game, like any game, if you're gonna have an enemy that can instantly kill the player, they should be visually distinct, or slow, or something so that you can, react to it. Red Faction doesn't do that. See, instead they make all the mercs slightly different colors, and the stronger ones get shoulder pads, which you'll probably not notice in the heat of the moment. Those insta-kill weapons? Well, one of them is the BFG I mentioned earlier. It's mercifully rare to run into an enemy using it, but they're always set up to ambush you. I don't think I personally got fucked over by them at any point, but I can certainly see it happening. No, what gets me the most is the fucking railgun guys.
Go!
I hate them. Remember, the mercs all look very similar, especially once the game is spawning mostly heavies and commandos. Like, yes, technically they look different, but they're all just dudes with shoulder pads. In the split second you often have to recognize the threat, you'll just fucking die sometimes. The railgun is massive, so really the strategy is just to look at every enemy's hands and shoot the guy with the longest barrel. Seriously though, these railgun guys gave me a run for my money, especially in vanilla. See, the railgun can shoot straight through walls, and you're gonna want to abuse that when you get it, because it's one of the only weapons that shoots where you aim it 100% of the time. It's also a guaranteed kill on hit, so if you know there's a dangerous enemy ahead, you can just wallbang them. However, the enemies can do this too, and sometimes they'll react so goddamn fast you'll die before you even see them. Or you just crouch and they shoot right through your cover. Or alternatively, you walk into a room, realize you're fucked, back out of the room, and get shot through a wall. This only happened like 20 times, it's okay. Even if you've got a handle on the railgun boys, you're still gonna be taking tons of unavoidable damage from the strongest hit-scan weapons in the game. The heavy machine gun and precision rifle are the closest things this game has to guns that don't suck, and they're the primary weapon of about half the merc enemies in the game. The mercs are so goddamn tanky, it makes managing groups of them difficult with any weapon. It's bad enough the railgun assholes can one-shot you, but they also shrug off anything shy of a headshot, as do all of the other mercs. There's also so many of them in any given fight. Like, seriously, sometimes they just swarm you. It doesn't help that the game treats some rooms like fucking clown cars, where these guys can just continuously spawn in as long as you're not looking at them. The game seriously spawns the toughest enemies in the game behind you, repeatedly. They fire on you so fast, like you can't just run a gun. These guys are just... there's too much hit scan, so you just do more door fighting. Have I mentioned that just about every single door in this game is an automatic door that closes itself almost immediately once you're more than about 2 inches from it? So there's been a great many times where a door slams in my face while I'm firing. So even the door fighting, a shitty tactic that I'm forced to use, has some annoying quirk to it. How does this game have an 85% positive rating on Steam? Parker's movement also isn't anything special. He's not nearly as fast as I would like, but he does move with a bit of haste. I actually really like the heavy bobbing of the weapons as he walks. It just looks good to me. What I don't like is how bouncy he is anytime he's not firmly planted on the ground. That clip earlier of the bucket puzzle really highlights what I'm talking about. Oftentimes it feels like bumping into objects while jumping triggers some sort of push force. The slightly lower gravity, while a nice touch of detail, makes jumping feel really slow. Even being made to jump a small gap can feel sluggish. It's hard to explain, you just feel so floaty. Floatier than even Halo. And yet despite the low gravity, for some reason you can take fall damage from practically any kind of fall whatsoever. The movement only stands out to me as a bit lacking because this game will routinely put you in situations where you're at a disadvantage or ambushed with minimal cover. Not being able to zip around a little faster is more significant when you're forced into one of these situations. Take for example this one part here where you get captured, because this game doesn't want me to stop comparing it to Half-Life. You wake up in a cell, and roughly 30 seconds later the Red Faction comes to bust you out. Naturally they're terrible at it, leaving you to fend for yourself. But look at the situation here. You start the segment unarmed, without armor, in a small room without cover that leads into a hallway with an automated turret and a good 4 or 5 mercs who immediately shoot at you on sight. The only way to get a weapon is to go into this hallway and grab it off the corpse of the guy who came to save you. I've got a clip here of me doing it about as efficiently as I can manage, but whether or not you make it out of this death trap seems like a crapshoot to me. I don't move fast, so it's not like I can rush him down. All I can do is the old reliable strategy of hugging doors and hoping the enemy pushes me but doesn't kill me. Except for the turret. I gotta play peekaboo with it. Classic Red Faction gameplay right here, fellas. This game has boss battles, by the way. Not a lot of them, but they're pretty terrible, so it's a quality over quantity situation. I'm counting Gargantuobot as a boss, set piece or not. We already know how that goes. There's also this part where you're chasing K-Pek and you gotta drop into a pit and fight this stiff, shitty worm thing that dies in like 9 seconds. It has dramatic music playing while you fight it, so it's meant to be some form of highlight. But no, our real stars of the evening are K-Pek and Masako themselves. Yeah, you get to fight them, and I wish you didn't, honestly. God, what do I even say about this? K-Pek's fight comes after a long chase through several segments before it. The fight is complete and utter garbage. It's blatantly unfair, and it's one of the easiest examples I have of evidence leading me to believe this game didn't get enough playtesting. After fighting several elite guards in this open room with limited cover, naturally, K-Pek spawns and starts fucking flying around and shooting home and energy projectiles at you. His attacks move so fast that I don't know why they also needed to home in on the player, especially considering I move like an elderly person on a jog. Technically, these attacks can be dodged, a rare treat in this game, except as I said, they home in on you, pretty hard, and they do significant damage. So much damage that when I got to this point with full HP and a little under 40 armor, he fucking two-shots me. Yeah, so this boss is clearly cheap and unfair and I don't respect it. I find the nearest door and employ the strategy, except this time...
It's the antidote for the plague and we'll let you live.
Alas, my dear, you have no say in who lives or dies here.
Yeah, these attacks go straight through walls. Fucking amazing. I died so many times doing this fight that I decided to save any time I managed to do some damage without being hit. It's also not really clear that your attacks are having any effect on him, given he has a fuck-off barrier. Eventually it pops and you can shoot him directly, and the absolute instant he's defeated, it just...
Parker, stop! Don't kill him!
That's... I didn't cut that there. Masako isn't any better. In fact, she's probably worse. The fight has 2 phases. You start the fight in one of those space jets, and she has one too. And after like 20 seconds of doing damage to her, you're quite literally forced out of the jet onto the ground. Luckily for me, this dealt falling damage because I wasn't expecting to have my jet explode due to winning the first part of the fight. You know, so I was flying up rather high. The second phase is like K-Pek's fight, only more bullshit because she has a hit scan weapon. She's also fucking flying, and your only cover are these random piles of crates with massive amounts of open space between them. Everything that isn't immediately next to one of these crates might as well be a kill boundary. The only viable solution here is to hug the crates, take pot shots, and hope for the best. This is the final boss of the game, the finale, the climax, and it's nothing but a miserable mess of barely tested design choices. Just like the weapons. Are you ready, kids? I've saved my favorite part of this game for last. It's absolutely abysmal arsenal. That's right, we're finally here. It's time for the rant. Listen, alright? I can usually accept a game having mediocre or just plain and average weapons. Half-Life gets shit for having lackluster weapons, but Half-Life's weapons are leagues better than this crap. At least Half-Life's weapons are all relatively useful. Red Faction's weapons range from almost useless to acceptable. Where do I start? How about we start with the first weapon you get, the stun baton. I have used it maybe twice. It's the mandatory melee weapon, I guess. Except it also has ammo, so you can use a really good and useful alternate attack that functions kinda like a chainsaw. It doesn't matter, because there will never be a good reason to use it after you club the first guard to get his pistol. It's quite literally nothing but a last resort. It's not even like the crowbar in Half-Life where you can use it to save ammo on certain enemies, because almost everything in this game attacks with hit scan. If you're advancing towards something in this game with a melee weapon in your hand, it's likely going to kill you. If you don't have the ammo, just reload a save. Next up is the pistol. It's RNG, the gun. Most weapons in Red Faction have random bullet deviation that's so severe I can't even adapt to it. The pistol is probably the worst offender, though. You really feel how inaccurate it is given how goddamn open the first couple sections of the game are, where it's basically your only good ranged option. You're just walking around, plinking at enemies with this thing, more or less just hoping your shots land. Even with your crosshair perfectly centered on an enemy who isn't moving, you'll just see missed shots pinging off the wall behind them, non-stop. It's fucking infuriating. Luckily, the enemies seem to be horrible with it too, so at least it's consistent. I've heard attaching the silencer makes the gun more accurate, but I think that's bullshit. I don't see a difference. The shotgun. Oh, the shotgun. The shotgun is probably one of the worst I've seen in any game. It looks like a derpy Spaz 12. I can't even fully understand what's wrong here. The fucking manual doesn't even know how this gun functions. It calls it a fully automatic shotgun, but really, it can waste 2 shells with its primary fire, which is pump action, but the alt fire is semi-auto and uses 1 shell. And the spread increases. What the fuck? It's great because it's not one of those shotguns that can be used as your mid-range workhorse, because the spread for the primary fire is just tight enough that if your crosshair isn't perfectly centered on the enemy, you miss. And if you use the alt fire, the spread is so wide, you'll probably still miss. Despite my best efforts to adapt to this thing, it just feels terrible to use. I basically stop using it when I get the assault rifle, unless I'm out of assault rifle ammo. There's also a riot shield, which is mostly useless aside from as a repositioning tool, I guess. The only time I found it useful was when I was luring the Gargantua bot. The fucking shield can break, of course, so that sort of discourages me from using it more. There's a flamethrower which suffers from being one of those shitty video game flamethrowers. You know, the kind that has no fucking range and firing it can fuck over the person using it? It's not like video games can't do good flamethrowers. I can name 3 without even trying. Anyway, it's got similar problems to the stun baton in that if you're running at something in this game, you're gonna be shot repeatedly and probably die. And when you do light an enemy on fire, they run around like mad, colliding with you and damaging you. Even the burning corpses can hurt you from surprisingly far away. This weapon features my favorite bug in the game, where when you fire your last bit of fuel in the canister, the gun sound glitches out and makes a fun sound. That's nice, I'm glad they put that in. The assault rifle falls firmly into the acceptable end of the spectrum, being the first weapon you get a hold of that feels like the bullets sorta go where you're aiming. Make no mistake, this thing still sprays lead all over the goddamn place, even in its primary burst fire mode. Its alt fire is full auto, but it's so goddamn useless you might as well forget it exists. If you're not close enough to an enemy to grab them by the balls, you're not likely to hit shit in full auto. That being said, you can carry a substantial amount of ammo for this gun, and it's got a 42 round mag, so firing widely in close quarters sometimes does work out. It's still not good, it's just not as bad as the fucking shotgun. The submachine gun is basically a replacement pistol, but it doubles as a way to waste assault rifle ammo. Yeah, it's got a funky design actually. You'll notice it has 2 magazines in it. Its primary fire shoots, and its secondary fire swaps between pistol and assault rifle ammo. AR ammo does more damage but fires slowly, and pistol ammo just functions like a regular SMG, but you know, a Red Faction SMG, so it's not accurate. If you're tired of hearing me complain about accuracy, please understand that it's only a massive pain in the ass because human enemies have the build of stick figures and hitboxes to match, as I mentioned earlier. I've heard that there's an option in Dash Faction to use the multiplayer bullet deviation in the campaign, which for some reason is completely different and all the guns are almost laser accurate there. But when I'm reviewing games, I'm reviewing them as close to the intended and original experience as possible. The bullet deviation was a conscious decision by the developers for the campaign, for better or worse, so that's how I'm playing it. Moving on, we have the rocket launcher. I mentioned it while discussing Geomod, and honestly, it's kind of what it's best for. It's serviceable, it just isn't very satisfying to use outside of blasting holes in walls. Enemies in this game, in general, have very stiff death animations. Like, sometimes you hit a guy with a rocket and you see him fly back like a foot from an explosion. Other times they dramatically and slowly fall to their knees and collapse into the Family Guy death pose. Anyway, this game seems to have very minimal splash damage, which sucks because the rockets travel at like 1 mile an hour, so hitting things directly isn't exactly the first strategy that comes to mind. I don't know, the rockets are just kinda underwhelming. Like, okay, let's stop comparing to Half-Life for a second and take a look at a really good rocket launcher. Halo's rocket launcher. In Halo, when you hit someone with a rocket, or any explosion really, it looks like this. And in Red Faction, this. Just these stiff deaths, leaving the weapon feeling like it has no impact. Hell, Halo's also got a fantastic shotgun, come to think of it. Just for fun, let's look at this. Yeah, that's a shotgun. The other explosives don't fare too well. I mean, I briefly discussed them earlier. The grenades are floaty, and the C4 is fun, but a novelty. They're more useful, like the rockets, for blowing holes in things. A function this game doesn't use enough, as we've discussed. Explosives in this game are so unsatisfying, I had to go back and capture new footage of me using them after writing this, because I barely touched them in my initial playthrough. The fusion rocket has absurd splash damage, but once it's introduced, the game shoves you into close combat situations more often. So you know, I don't want to use it because I'll die. Hey Stan, does this game have any good weapons? By my standards, no. But the last 4 are considerably less terrible. We've discussed the railgun, so I'm gonna move on to the sniper rifle, which is honestly my favorite weapon in the game. Because like the railgun, the bullet goes where you aim. Every time. And it fires fairly fast, so even in mid to close range I found it to be pretty useful. Its younger brother is the fan favorite weapon, the precision rifle. It's one of the more accurate weapons, and it's horribly unbalanced, especially in multiplayer. It's basically a slightly weaker sniper rifle that can fire like this. In multiplayer, where the bullets are basically lasers, this is oppressively strong. In campaign, it's pretty much the replacement for the assault rifle once the mercs start showing up. Well, this or the LMG, our last weapon in the roster. It's horribly inaccurate, but its alt-fire makes the spread tighten up and cuts the fire rate down to a crawl, so it's actually not terrible. With a little practice, this can easily become your main weapon, at least in mid-range. Up close, you have the option for spray and pray, which I do a lot because about half of the mercs in this game use this or the precision rifle, so ammo for it is everywhere. Honestly, once you get the merc guns, you pretty much won't ever need to use the early game weapons again. I consider this a flaw personally, considering this is a game where you can carry every weapon in it at once. This isn't like Doom or the Orange Man game, where all your weapons have certain use cases, even the weaker ones to an extent. You sort of just keep replacing guns with whatever's more generally effective. And that's really due to the fact that the combat is just so goddamn bland and basic and shitty, which I think I've gone on about enough now. This isn't even a case where I can be like, oh, okay, the combat's lame, but there's other things holding it up, because there really isn't much to this game when you break it down. You go to a place, you shoot everyone, you do some crappy set piece or some brainlit puzzle, and then Hendrix or Eos pop up and tell you to go somewhere and do it all again. The whole game revolves around combat. It's clearly trying to be an adventure FPS, like Half-Life or Halo, but it's got terrible shooting, and there's nothing else really here to prop it up unless you count Geomod, which is underutilized, even in regards to the combat. So all this being said, what do I think of this game's combat? It should be obvious that I think it's really mediocre. It is, at best, serviceable, and at worst, trash. And I'm not going to sit here and break down the multiplayer for another 12 minutes, because honestly, it's also nothing special. I played a few sessions, maybe like 5 hours in total, which is a lot for a game with absolutely zero progression and a player base smaller than my subscriber count. As I said, the weapons are all hyper-accurate in multiplayer, and they're also horribly balanced. I couldn't find any vanilla servers, but the custom maps I played on were fun. It's definitely one of those old-school FPS games where you can die and just get screwed for a few minutes because you can't get a hold of a decent gun. It's a fun way to waste an afternoon, but I don't think it offers anything over other games of its era. Because even with laser-accurate versions of these weapons, the combat is just bland and the weapons aren't very impactful. Alright, that was the rant. I'm calm again. Now that we're through it though, why don't we wrap this up? So, what is Red Faction? What do I think of it? Is it trash? Is it a classic? Should we praise its accomplishments with its fancy engine? Or should we forget it ever happened because of its awkward combat? Well, honestly, despite how utterly negative this video got in the latter parts, I still kinda like this game. I don't like it enough to overlook its glaring issues, but it's a novel game from an era where lots of games were doing things we'd never seen before. The positives of Red Faction are its really unique engine, its great atmosphere, its awesome soundtrack, and a fun and cheesy-ass story. This game wears its inspiration on its sleeve, and I don't think that's an accident. It comes off to me like Volition, despite their budget issues, really wanted to come out swinging with a memorable game. And in a lot of ways, Red Faction manages to be memorable. Hell, it's the whole reason I'm even talking about it. But I do think it's a bit ridiculous to compare this middle-shelf title to things like Half-Life. Red Faction is a janky, messy game with kinda trash gameplay. But somehow, it still has enough here to be charming, and that's probably why so many people consider it a classic. Red Faction, for me, was one of the first FPS games I ever played. Its atmosphere was really what hooked me as a kid, and ensured I would seek out and enjoy things like Half-Life later. But revisiting it now, as an adult, it's sort of impossible not to be cynical about it, at least for me. Red Faction isn't that good, honestly. It's like a solid 6 out of 10, and that's being generous. But if you're someone who enjoys experiencing older titles and is interested in gaming history, this is probably something you'll want to check out, if only for the sake of seeing the Geomod engine in all its limited glory. Regardless of how I feel about it, many people still seem to love this game, and I don't want to take that away from them. With all these games lately getting remakes, many of them unnecessary in my opinion, it'd be kinda nice to see a reboot of this series. Redo this game, but make the combat actually good. Keep what worked, make the set pieces more functional and involved, remove the stealth, and expand on the Geomod stuff. I think it could be awesome with the right developers behind it. In conclusion, Red Faction isn't my favorite FPS from this era, but I do remember it. It's got a lot of problems, but I can't help but still find it charming, like there's so much potential here for something truly great. It's just a shame that the game didn't lean into its Geomod stuff more. Until next time, I'm the one true Stan, and I'll see you for my next video in 2027, where I'll review fucking, I don't know, Pong or something. Okay, bye. Video's over, you could go now.